prevailing story of human history, one of linear ascent culminating in modern civilization, is built upon a fragile foundation, the evidence that has managed to survive the relentless churn of geology. The hypothesis presented challenges this linear model, suggesting that the human story is, instead, a cycle of repeated genesis and cataclysm. It proposes the existence of a sophisticated civilization that flourished roughly 80,000 to 100,000 years ago, before the last glacial maximum and the catastrophic Toba eruption, a culture whose remnants now lie beneath kilometers of sediment or hundreds of meters of ocean water. Revising the standard timeline. Anomalies that break the mold standard archaeology posits that organized, civilized life began around 6,000 years ago. Yet the last half-century of discovery has yielded a steady stream of anomalies that push the timeline back, suggesting that humanity's capacity for organization, abstract thought, and architecture emerged far earlier than previously accepted. A. The Jericho and Göbekli Tepe revolution. First cracks in the timeline appeared with the discovery of sites that demonstrated complex social organization long before the advent of conventional civilization. Jericho, Levant. Unearthed in 1957, the pre-pottery culture at Jericho dated to around 10,000 BCE. This was a complex, permanent settlement, complete with defensive walls and towers, existing thousands of years before the historical city described in biblical accounts. It proved that organized community life was possible among peoples traditionally classified as Neolithic. Göbekli Tepe, Turkey. Dating back 11,500 years, this site completely rewrote the narrative of hunter-gatherers. Built by people without agriculture or metal tools, it features massive, perfectly carved T-shaped limestone pillars weighing up to 20 tons. The precision, symmetry, and sheer scale of the construction imply organized labor, astronomical knowledge, and a shared ritual or symbolic culture. The builders were supposedly simple hunter-gatherers, but the site itself demands a more complex, structured society, a clear testament to advanced capabilities predating known cities by millennia. The argument made here is that if Göbekli Tepe is so ancient and sophisticated, it must not be the starting point, but rather a fragmentary survivor, a cultural memory from something vastly older that was nearly erased by the younger Dryas climate event. B. The context of the Eemian period. Proposed ancient civilization aligns with the Eemian interglacial period, which peaked about 125,000 years ago. This was a period of mild global climate, higher sea levels than today, and abundant fertile land across Eurasia and Africa. It was an environment conducive to the rise of complex settled societies, not just migratory tribes. Crucially, multiple human species including Homo sapiens and Neanderthals coexisted during this era, potentially exchanging not just genes, but knowledge and technologies. This environment could have nurtured the initial seeds of truly structured, large-scale society. O. The ocean's blackout. Evidence from submerged ruins. The vast majority of evidence from this proposed early civilization is believed to be lost beneath the continental shelves. During the last glacial maximum, over 20 million square kilometers of continental shelf were dry land, forming fertile coastal plains and river deltas. When the glaciers melted and the seas rapidly rose, a rise of over 400 feet in a few thousand years, these settlements were entirely submerged, turning ancient cities into mineral ghosts beneath silt and coral. May. The Gulf of Khambhat, India. A grid under the waves. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence comes from the Gulf of Khambhat, formerly Cambay, off India's west coast. The discovery. In 2001, the National Institute of Ocean Technology, using side-scan sonar, discovered vast geometric structures lying under 120 feet of water. These included long parallel lines, right angles, and clear rectilinear foundations stretching over a 5-mile area. The precision of the shapes, seemingly too regular for natural formations, strongly suggests architecture. The dating controversy. Dredging operations recovered artifacts, including pottery, stone tools, and carbon-dated wood, which returned ages of approximately 9,000 years. While this already makes it a pre-Indus Valley site, critics point out that sediment analysis around the artifacts hints at an origin possibly 30,000 years or more ago. If the shapes are truly architectural, They would challenge every assumption about the origin of civilization in Asia. The possibility remains that the site was either a river channel that coincidentally formed geometric outlines, or a genuine city predating all known civilizations. B. The Yonaguni Monument, Japan. The submerged pyramid near Yonaguni Island. Japan, a colossal submerged structure, has become a lightning rod for the lost history hypothesis. The structure, discovered in 1986, the Yonaguni Monument appears to be a massive, terraced step pyramid carved into sandstone. It features right-angled edges, smooth vertical walls, carved stairways, and platforms aligned with cardinal directions. The debate. Geologists argue that the formation is entirely natural, shaped by the fracturing of rock along joint planes in a seismically active area. Proponents, including marine archaeologists who have mapped the site extensively, argue that the regularity, the precise 90-degree corners, and the features resembling altars and roadways are too deliberate to be coincidence. Fossilized coral suggests the structure was submerged at least 10,000 years ago, placing its period of use firmly within the window of the last glacial melting. C. The Sunderland hypothesis in global memory. The discovery of drowned settlements extends to the Sunda Shelf, a vast, now submerged landmass that once connected Indonesia, Malaysia, and parts of Southeast Asia. British archaeologist Stephen Oppenheimer proposed the Sunderland hypothesis, suggesting this massive, fertile region may have been a cradle of early human culture. When the post-glacial floods consumed this area, survivors dispersed, carrying with them the seeds of agriculture, technology, and, crucially, myth. This hypothesis connects the widely shared myths of a great flood, from Mesopotamia's Utnapishtim to India's Manu and Noah's Ark, as cultural fossils tracing back to the catastrophic, real-life deluges that drowned these coastlines 70,000 to 12,000 years ago. Third, the code in the stone. Technology and symbolic thought to truly prove a civilization existed. Evidence of abstract thought is needed: symbols, writing, ritual, and art. The existing archaeological record provides hints that symbolic and technological complexity emerged far earlier than previously believed. A. Advanced tool-making and industry. The Middle Stone Age, MSA, in regions like North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, has revealed an unexpected level of sophistication, precision and standardization. Finds show flint blades with precision edges, symmetrical spear points crafted from obsidian, and evidence of heat treatment to improve tool durability. These tools were not merely primitive flakes for immediate survival, but products of intention and calculated design, sometimes showing signs of mass production and standardization, traits indicative of an organized industry or economy. Namada Valley, India. Deep within this valley, tools found beneath volcanic ash layers dating to over 70,000 years ago were meticulously crafted with remarkable symmetry and polish. This suggests a capacity for standardization and organized production that is inconsistent with the prevailing model of nomadic groups. B. Megalithic mysteries and astronomical alignment. The existence of megalithic structures that seem to require advanced planning and celestial understanding also points to an earlier capacity for structured civilization. Adam's Calendar, South Africa. In the Mpumalanga region, this circular stone ruin is aligned with the solstices. Though fiercely debated, some erosion and astronomical models suggest an age exceeding 75,000 years. If true, this structure proves that early Homo sapiens, or a related species, possessed astronomical knowledge, architecture, and long-term planning, the fundamentals of civilization. Puma Punku, Bolivian Andes. Though officially dated to 1,500 years ago, the stones are cut with such precision that a sheet of paper cannot fit between the joints. The geology suggests patterns of erosion inconsistent with the local climate, leading some to hypothesize that the builders were inheriting the geometric and stone manipulation techniques of a much older, lost culture. This global pattern, the obsession with symmetry, stone construction, and celestial order, suggests a shared, or at least parallel, development of abstract, complex thought long before written history. C. Early symbolic art and aesthetic consciousness. The search for a code or writing leads to the earliest signs of non-utilitarian art. Indonesian cave paintings. Paintings in the Sulawesi caves date back 60,000 years or more, with complex motifs that suggest a shared symbolic tradition. Venus of Barakat Ram, Golan Heights. Dating between 230,000 and 800,000 years ago, this mysterious carved object bears deliberate human modification, grooves and shaping, suggestive of a female figure. If genuine, it means symbolic art predates modern humanity itself, hinting at an aesthetic consciousness capable of expression, memory, and cultural transmission. IV. The Mastery of Fire and the Great Annihilation. The mastery of fire is the first technology and the true separator of humanity from the beasts. The narrative suggests that organized fire use for industrial purposes began much earlier than expected. A. Pre-agricultural industry and resource management. The Nwaya Mine, Swaziland. The use of controlled fire to roast hematite ore before extraction suggests a deliberate act of chemical transformation, implying that early humans understood how to use heat to change matter for organized resource use, tens of millennia before agriculture. Fire setting. Evidence in various older mining contexts suggests the use of fire setting, heating rock to fracture it for easier extraction. This sophisticated technique, often associated with the Bronze Age, may have been discovered and passed down through oral tradition by Paleolithic engineers. This level of resource extraction and coordinated fire use demands organization, a division of labor, and a shared understanding of process, the essential elements of a civilization in embryo. B. The Toba catastrophe. The Great Filter de Gyojati. Most compelling reason for the complete disappearance of this pre-97,000-year-old world is the Toba eruption in Sumatra. Approximately 74,000 years ago, apocalyptic scale. Toba was one of the largest volcanic events in 2 million years. Its massive ash plume circled the globe, plunging the planet into a volcanic winter that lasted decades, collapsing ecosystems, and devastating populations. The genetic bottleneck. Genetic studies show a dramatic bottleneck in human DNA around this time, suggesting our ancestors were reduced to a tiny population of mere thousands. If a global civilization existed before Toba, it would have been annihilated instantly, with the subsequent volcanic winter acting as the final cultural filter. The flood myths and legends of divine fire, ash, and global extinction, scattered across human cultures, may all be an echo of this singular species-defining catastrophe that erased the first civilization and forced the few scattered survivors to begin the human story again. The mastery of fire, industry, and the oldest technology. Fire is not merely heat. It is the first great technology, the key to mastering energy, transforming raw materials, and establishing organized settlements. The original narrative suggests that the mastery of fire for industrial and complex purposes began tens of thousands of years before the traditional Bronze Age timeline. The debate over early mining and metallurgy. The evidence for pre-agricultural industry is found deep within the earth. Nwaya Mine, Swaziland. This site remains critical. While conventional radiocarbon dating on charcoal places mining activity at 43,000 years ago, the geological layers and context suggest potentially older origins, perhaps stretching toward the 70,000-year mark. The key here is not just the act of digging, but the purpose. Miners were extracting hematite, a reddish iron ore. The potential use was for ochre, pigment for ritual or art. But the fact that some researchers suggest microscopic traces of controlled fire were used to roast the ore before extraction is transformative. Roasting ore is a deliberate act of chemical transformation, a rudimentary form of pyrotechnology that demonstrates a foundational understanding of heat's power to change mineral structure for easier processing. Such an endeavor requires complex coordination, labor division, and shared knowledge, pointing toward an industrialized, organized society, not a simple nomadic tribe. Rudna Glava, Serbia. While this site is officially dated to a younger time frame, around 7,000 years ago, for copper extraction, the techniques employed, such as fire setting, suggest a continuity of knowledge. Fire setting involves heating the rock face with intense fire, and then rapidly cooling it with water, causing the rock to fracture and allowing easier removal of ore. This method, mentioned in Bronze Age texts, is based on universal physics. The narrative asks, Could this technique have been discovered by observation and passed down through millennia of oral tradition by earlier, unrecorded Paleolithic engineers who understood the geological mechanics of the Earth? B. Fire, landscape, and organized life beyond minerals. Fire was also the first tool for environmental engineering, fire stick farming. In parts of northern Australia and Africa, the practice of controlled burns to encourage the growth of specific plants and attract grazing animals, a primitive form of landscape management, is suggested by charred soil layers to have begun as early as 100,000 years ago. If correct, this fire stick farming places humanity's first comprehensive environmental engineering project, an entire ice age before the Neolithic Revolution, indicating a sedentary lifestyle and a long-term planning horizon. Continuous hearth use. At sites like Qesem Cave in Israel, fire pits dating back more than 300,000 years show evidence of continuous use for cooking, light maintenance, and tool production. The fact that the hearths were rebuilt in the exact same location again and again for thousands of years implies an extraordinary level of social continuity, communal planning, and cultural memory. Fire was not a novelty. It was the cultural center of a stable, structured community. C. Enigmatic metal anomalies. The idea of pre-97,000-year industry is underscored by baffling anomalies. The Klerksdorp spheres, South Africa. Reportedly discovered in Precambrian rock, these metallic spheres, though mostly classified by geologists as natural concretions formed by volcanic processes, exhibit unusual symmetry and etched grooves. For proponents of lost civilizations, the question remains, could they represent a highly rudimentary form of metallurgy? Perhaps early attempts by humans to heat treat or manipulate mineral nodules, a technology lost to time. The debate highlights how easily evidence of an ephemeral, early technology could be dismissed as natural geology over such vast timescales. The Libyan desert glass. Scattered across hundreds of kilometers of the Libyan desert, this pure silica glass was formed by temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees C. The mainstream explanation is a meteorite impact 29 million years ago. Yet the narrative raises a question about rediscovery. Could humanity, perhaps through forgotten methods of highly intense smelting or atmospheric fire manipulation, have achieved similar temperatures in deep antiquity, only to have that knowledge vanish? The presence of this unique glass in ancient Egyptian artifacts like Tutankhamun's pectoral connects this geological anomaly to the human timeline, albeit a much later one. By the Great Filter, Toba, and the mechanism of amnesia. If a civilization did reach a sophisticated level between 130,000 and 70,000 years ago, what mechanism could have eradicated it so thoroughly that only whispers remain? The answer, according to this hypothesis, is the Toba catastrophe, Doe. The Toba eruption, a global reset around 74,000 years ago. The Toba supervolcano in modern-day Indonesia exploded. This was not a localized disaster. It was a global ecological and cultural reset. Volcanic winter. The eruption released an estimated 2,800 cubic kilometers of ash, creating a global plume that blocked sunlight and plunged the planet into a volcanic winter lasting decades. Global temperatures dropped severely, leading to a massive collapse of ecosystems worldwide. Annihilation. Any global, interconnected civilization existing at that moment would have been annihilated instantly by the blast. The ensuing acid rain, and the decades of reduced sunlight and freezing temperatures. The survivors would have been scattered, isolated groups struggling for mere sustenance, forced to shed all but the most basic survival knowledge. B. The genetic and cultural bottlenecks. The archaeological evidence strongly supports Toba's impact. Genetic evidence. Genetic studies confirm a severe population bottleneck in Homo sapiens around 70,000 years ago, suggesting that the population was reduced to as few as several thousand breeding individuals. This event shaped the genetic diversity of all modern humans. Cultural bottleneck. The narrative suggests the catastrophe served as a cultural bottleneck. The knowledge, architecture, and symbolic systems of the pre-Toba world were destroyed. The isolated survivors, driven by migration and necessity, carried only fragmented, distorted memories of their former high culture. These memories, passed down through generations, became the core of the global myths of fire, divine punishment, and global flood. The Toba catastrophe thus acts as the perfect mechanism for global amnesia. C. the recurrence of catastrophe and renewal. The loss of the pre-Toba world was followed by subsequent, devastating environmental change. The rapid sea level rise that drowned the coastal cities of the last glacial maximum, 12,000 to 8,000 years ago. The flood myths may therefore be an overlap, a collective trauma spanning generations that began with the Toba winter and culminated with the post-glacial deluge. Humanity was repeatedly subjected to an apocalyptic cycle of destruction and forced rebirth. 7. Philosophical implications. History as a cycle. The ultimate point of this deep historical exploration is not just the pursuit of artifacts, but a profound philosophical reframing of the human story. A. Progress versus rediscovery. Standard history views the human journey as one of uninterrupted progress, from the club to the circuit board. The hypothesis of the lost 97,000-year-old civilization suggests an alternative. What if the human story is not one of progress, but of rediscovery again and again after each forgetting? This implies that intelligence, high culture, and technological capacity are not unique achievements of the current era, but recurrent phenomena. Advanced knowledge may appear vanished due to catastrophe, and reappear centuries or millennia later, as humanity continually wakes from amnesia, remembering fragments of a dream it once lived. B. The gravity of forgotten ages. The evidence, the submerged geometric lines, the anomalous tools, the inexplicable celestial alignments are not conclusive proof, but rather a pattern of recurrence. They illustrate the enduring human desire to impose order on chaos, to align heaven and earth, and to remember even after forgetting. The code in the stone, if it exists, may not be a literal inscription, but the rhythm of construction, organization, and symbolic thought that keeps emerging whenever conditions allow. The gravity of these forgotten ages presses upward through the soil, whispering of a time when the rhythm of stars was the measure of knowledge, and when vast stone structures stood on shores now deep beneath the tide. See the ruthless editor. Earth itself is cast as a ruthless editor, a planet whose geological forces constantly recycle and erase its witnesses. Plate tectonics constantly consumes the oldest ocean crust. Mountains rise and erode. Sediments crush civilizations into silence. The fact that any trace of this deep history survives at all, like the geometric shapes resisting the Arabian Sea currents, suggests that the lost civilization must have been built on a monumental scale, utilizing durable materials like stone and fire-hardened tools.